Have you ever looked around and thought, wait a second, if the economy's doing so great, why does my wallet still feel empty? You're not imagining it. Around the world, millions of people are asking the same question. Stock markets are hitting record highs. Governments are reporting strong GDP growth. Yet somehow, everything from rent to groceries to childcare feels heavier than ever. Welcome to what economists are quietly calling the Silent Recession, a hidden downturn that doesn't show up in traditional numbers, but shows up in real life. And in this video, we're breaking down its 10 levels, from the illusion of GDP growth to why work itself no longer guarantees financial stability. Level 1, the GDP illusion. Let's start with what looks like good news. Everywhere you look, you hear that GDP, the total value of goods and services a country produces, is rising. On paper, that sounds great, but here's the catch. GDP doesn't measure how people feel about the economy. It measures how much money is flowing through it. If the price of food or rent goes up by 20%, that counts as economic activity. So GDP grows, even though you're spending more for the same stuff. It's a bit like counting the number of calories you eat, not the nutrients you actually get. Globally, GDP per person has roughly doubled since 1970, but median household incomes haven't even come close. In the US, for example, the typical family's income has risen about 40% since the 1970s, while the cost of living has risen several times that. So, while the charts show growth, people's budgets tell a different story. That's the first illusion of prosperity, the GDP illusion. Level 2, shrinkflation and skimpflation. Next, let's talk about what happens when companies don't want to raise prices, but still face higher costs. They quietly make things smaller or cheaper. You've probably noticed it yourself. The chocolate bar that feels lighter, the cereal box that used to last a week, but now barely covers 3 breakfasts. That's shrinkflation, paying the same price, getting less product. And then there's skimpflation. When companies cut corners on quality or service instead of size, maybe the airline used to offer free snacks. Now it's paper bag. Or the hotel reduced housekeeping to save water. But really, it's saving money. Economists call this hidden inflation. Because the sticker price doesn't change, but your experience does. It's subtle, it's everywhere, and it makes your money stretch less than it used to. Level 3, the new invisible inflation. Now, invisible inflation takes things one step further. This isn't about smaller packages or worse service. It's about costs that creep up without anyone noticing. For example, banks that add new maintenance fees, streaming services quietly raising prices or splitting one platform into 3 subscriptions, utility companies adding service charges that don't appear in official inflation indexes. Consumers end up paying more each month, but it doesn't look like traditional inflation. And because we adapt, most people just absorb it. Until one day you realize your paycheck doesn't go nearly as far. Economists are warning about this new invisible inflation, a silent tax that eats away at real purchasing power without showing up in the data. It's part of what makes the economy feel strong on paper, but weak in practice. Level 4, stagnant income versus variable costs. Here's the real heart of the problem. Your income is flat, but your expenses aren't across much of the world. Wages haven't kept pace with inflation. In fact, the International Labor Organization reported that global real wages actually fell in 2022, the first drop in decades. Meanwhile, the things people can't live without, housing, energy, healthcare, education, have risen far faster than official inflation numbers suggest. These are what economists call variable costs, things you have to pay for no matter what. When they rise unpredictably, they squeeze households from every angle. So, even if GDP grows and inflation stabilizes, your personal economy, the one that decides whether you can save, travel, or afford a mortgage, might still be shrinking. Level 5, the silent debt explosion. When income doesn't keep up, people turn to credit. And that's where we find the next level, the silent debt explosion. Household debt is now at record levels globally. In the US alone, consumer debt has crossed $18 trillion. Around the world, total public and private debt has ballooned to over $300 trillion. That's about 3 times the size of the global economy. And here's what's tricky. All that borrowing props up GDP. Every time someone swipes a credit card or takes out a car loan, it adds to economic growth. But the bill always comes due, and when interest rates rise, those debts quietly start to crush disposable income. So yes, the economy looks busy, but much of that activity is built on borrowed money. And for individuals, that creates a fragile illusion of prosperity that can vanish with a single missed payment. Level 6. The wealth divide grows. Now, not everyone is struggling. In fact, at the top of the economy, things look better than ever. Over the past few years, billionaires have added trillions to their combined wealth. The richest 1% now own more wealth than the bottom 95% combined. It's not just about envy, it's about how that inequality changes the structure of the economy itself. When wealth concentrates, spending power concentrates. High-end goods thrive. Luxury real estate booms. But the middle of the market, where most people live, stagnates. So while GDP grows, that growth is increasingly captured by a smaller slice of society. It's another example of why you can have a strong economy, but still feel poor. Level 7, a two-faced economy. This brings us to what economists call the two-faced economy. On one side, companies report record profits, stock markets surge, unemployment rates look low. On the other side, ordinary households are cutting back, taking on debt, and working longer hours just to stay afloat. It's as if two different economies are operating in the same country, one booming, one barely surviving. And in many ways, both our true economic strength isn't distributed evenly. It clusters around industries, cities, and income levels, meaning averages can lie. So, when politicians point to growth or job numbers, they're technically right, but they're only telling half the story. The other half is the part people feel every day. Level 8. Work isn't enough anymore. For generations, having a steady job meant financial security. Today, that's no longer guaranteed. Across both developed and developing countries, millions of full-time workers are still living below the poverty line. In the US, that's over 6 million people, most of them working full-time. In Europe, about 8% of all workers face the same reality. That means that even with a job, people can't afford basic housing, childcare, or healthcare without debt. And the rise of the gig economy, short-term contracts, delivery apps, freelancing, has made incomes even more unpredictable. Economists sometimes call this the decoupling of work and wealth. Employment is up, but the ability to live comfortably on that work is down. That's another silent recession playing out in plain sight. Level 9, collapse of savings and retirement. And what happens when paychecks barely cover expenses? Savings collapse. In the US, just over half of adults have enough savings to cover 3 months of basic expenses. Globally, that picture is similar. Millions living paycheck to paycheck with little room for emergencies. Retirement savings are even worse. The median retirement account balance among working-age families in America is around $3,000. That's not $3,000 per month. That's total. This isn't just a personal finance issue. It's a systemic one. When people can't save, future consumption falls, and long-term stability weakens. It's the final stage of the squeeze. Even if you're managing today, tomorrow looks more uncertain. Level 10, how to survive the silent recession. So, what can people actually do? First, understand that the silent recession isn't about panic, it's about awareness. The traditional economy is measured in aggregates. Your personal economy is measured in lived experience, And that's what matters most. Start with control, track spending, eliminate unnecessary subscriptions, and build even a small emergency fund. Every cushion helps. Next, invest, not just in assets, but in skills. Learning new, in-demand abilities, from coding to design to trades, is one of the few forms of wealth that inflation can't erode, and diversify your income where possible. Side hustles, freelance work, small business ideas, these aren't trends. They're survival strategies in a changing world. Finally, think long-term. Real assets like property, gold, or even land can hold value, but so can relationships and knowledge. In uncertain times, adaptability is the strongest currency. So, if you've been wondering why you feel poorer even when the economy looks strong, you're not wrong. GDP can rise, stock markets can soar, politicians can point to progress. But if everyday life feels harder, it's because the silent recession operates on a different level. In grocery aisles, in rent payments, in the quiet erosion of savings and security. The truth is, the global economy isn't collapsing. It's just changing, faster than most people's paychecks can keep up. Understanding these 10 levels doesn't make the struggle vanish, but it does give you clarity. And in a world where financial fog keeps thickening, clarity is power. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think.